願わくは Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Valley of the Judged. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me is my good brother here in the temple, the man who's currently on a journey of baking and bakery goods. Good brother Monarch.
I have recently got to write the greatest headline tweet for any of my shows, where I got to say, excuse me, like, are birds a Falmore conspiracy to spy on the Nords? Singer-songwriter Nelly Furtado says yes.
Wait, what?
And somehow that is relevant to the episode at hand. You know Nelly Furtado, she sang that song, I'm Like a Bird.
Okay, I get that, but...
Somehow he connected that song to the birds aren't real conspiracy. Just as a joke on the spot.
Okay.
So that became the headline.
Alright, I'll take it.
Like, he had me convinced.
Yeah. So, I had tweeted about the fact that we'd be doing this earlier. Obviously, we're not. Obviously, for those new, you're not seeing Megalos this week because of our 3-in-1 rule. But this is a recent addition. Bitter Chalice isn't technically out yet, but it was kickstarted not too long ago and is currently doing its smoke test for the backer kit part of things. I think also opening up late pledges. This is a project from the World Anvil people, specifically Tommaso De Benetti, whose work I have covered on this channel before with things like Valraven and Broken Tales. And a big reason that I wanted to cover this is I wanted to once again showcase that you can do Dark Souls in TTRPG format. I know a lot of people had this idea that you couldn't, especially after the Dark Souls 5e thing by Steamforged. But that was a failing on multiple levels. I've talked about it in the past. And despite what some may think, the fact that it used 5e was not one of the failings. Though I will note trying to do anything Dark Souls and have it be 5e compatible, i.e. compatible with the core 5e rule set, is going to be a losing gambit because you're going to have to do some massive overhauls. Chief among them being the way classes work. You know, because in a Souls-like, they don't. I can't really think of any direct Souls game or Souls-like that I've played in the last decade that actually has a specific class system. I know some claim that they do, but really that's just a starting package. Once you've gotten your starting equipment, you can go pretty much anywhere. Also, hello there, Shinzo. Welcome to the party. And yeah, can you think of any? Because I certainly can't.
No.
But
yeah, that said, where it was mentioned before, this isn't really a quick start, which is usually what you'd see from us when we do like these shorter ones, because a quick start doesn't really exist for this.
No.
They mentioned early on they thought it was like they couldn't effectively do a kickstart with how dense some of the rules could be.
Oh, quick start. You said kickstart.
Kickstart, quick start. But point in case, so what effectively we have is an overview of what to expect and some of the basic rulings of the system and setting and whatnot. So you can't really play out of this. But it's interesting enough to take a look at all the same.
Oh, yeah. Now, I did do an interview about this earlier in the year, and I will note, um, I did back the game on Kickstarter. So mentioning that in the interest of full disclosure. Um, Technically speaking, I had this overview months before they launched it, which is why it says 2024 on the copyright. But I had held off on this until after things were underway. But Bitter Chalice, as it describes itself, is an adventure RPG set in a bleak fantasy world, the Blighted Lands, surrounding the once lush and now cursed city of Vathan, where inhabitants are condemned to a life of thirst, hunger, and madness. It will be crowdfunded on, early 2025. It's already been crowdfunded. For those of you who are watching this on YouTube, the Kickstarter link is in the description. For the rest of you, especially for those of you on Twitch, let me put the link up. So there we go. And yes, after that they go into what it's going to be, what the plan is. And then where's the quick start? There is no quick start. Despite several attempts, the mechanics and setting of Bitter Chalice are so intertwined that we could have either offered a streamlined quick start that would have not have been representative of the final product, or risk creating a quick start so dense it would have been counterproductive. However, the work we put into prototyping the quick start was not wasted. It was of such high quality that we decided to turn it into a prologue called Escape the Mudfields, which will be included in the Bitter Chalice box as an introduction to the game. However, we didn't want to leave you high and dry, so we decided to do things a little differently than usual and create a detailed walkthrough of the game. Unlike a quick start, this overview is not playable, but provides a clear explanation of how Bitter Chalice works without getting lost in the details. It's a snapshot of everything that makes up the game experience, from character management to resolution mechanics, from map usage to setting, from enemies to equipment. By the end of this document, and without having to digest too many pages, you will have a good idea of what Bitter Chalice is intended to be, what it is not, and what experience it will provide at the table. And what is Escape the Mudfields? It's going to be an introductory mini-campaign that takes pre-gen characters through the Blighted Lands. It can be completed in 3 to 6 sessions and features a unique storyline. And it will be included in the box set. But Bitter Chalice is set in a dark fantasy world. More specifically, in the Blighted Lands, the region surrounding the city of Vathan. This area was one of the most prosperous and powerful due to the presence of holy water, a substance with miraculous properties, whose management was entrusted to the Order of Distillers, founded by the Sovereign of Vathan, and led by the wise Edel Lorius. Meanwhile, in the neighboring kingdoms, the influential organization of the United Churches called for crusades to seize the water. The city of Vathan was subjected to several invasions, which were fended off by defenses worn thinner with each battle, until an ancient force descended upon the region. The armies of the United Churches were decimated, while the people of Vathan fell into increasing madness. To contain the scourge of this mysterious evil, the United Churches erected the giant Walls of the Seal, which now encircle the entire region and prevent anyone from leaving. And the ramparts is overseen by the Company of the Veil, which has refused any attempt by the inhabitants to leave the area, cutting off all communication with the interior and abandoning the Blighted Lands to their fate. The time spent in isolation, combined with the effects of the curse, has corrupted the entire population. Now it is divided between desperate people trying to survive any way they can, powerful people obsessed with holy water, and poor wretches whose humanity has faded to a distant memory, replaced by a bestial and insane nature. Edel Lorius, keeper of the water's secrets, has mysteriously disappeared, while the Sovereign of Vathan is holed up in his palace. No one has seen him since the walls went up, except for a small circle of loyal servants. Although the Walls of the Seal prevent anyone from venturing outside, the United Churches regularly organize expeditions in search of useful information, arcane artifacts, and most importantly, drops of precious holy water. The parties of seekers, known as dowsers, are usually made up of people with nothing to lose, but there is no shortage of people driven by a thirst for knowledge or other noble motives. Every journey into the Blighted Lands is a lottery with death. Each step confronts the dowsers with new horrors, but also allows them to get closer to the truth of what really happened. In that regard, this is part of the reason why I said that this game has a better understanding of emulating a Souls-like than some attempts I've seen, like Dark Souls 5e did. Because right there you have that theme of this isolated place. A place that was once prosperous, but since has gone south.
It's definitely got the vibe down from at least just a more thematic standpoint so far. I haven't seen any of the other games to compare it to, but you definitely see the influence in the setting.
Yeah. And it's not, they haven't just cited Dark Souls, they've also cited Hollow Knight. Which, that's good company to be. In fact, they list out their inspirations right here. Hollow Knight, Bloodborne, Elden Ring, and Dark Souls. And I can see elements of each. But after that, they talk about the dangers of the place you're going into. The fact that there's two things you have to deal with: bitterness, which is a corruption of holy water that poisons those who drink it, and the languishing, which is a plague that winds its way through the population, driving people to heinous acts and mutating them into monstrosities devoid of humanity. And in addition, you have to deal with the consumption of your own resources, which are scarce and difficult to restore. And then we have a map of the Blighted Lands, which is this A2-sized map that you're going to be moving between. There are many regions and points of interest, areas and locations. The GM would list the locations that can be reached within the current area to the players, and the group decides on their destination. Which, this kind of thing is nice. I am curious how this would be handled on a VTT. I think it'd be relatively easy to do. And in this instance, the party has headed to the Outcast Refuge, so the GM takes the sticker for Outcast Refuge and places it there. Really hope the stickers are reusable. As the campaign progresses, the map will fill with icons based on the party's choices. It's not necessary to visit all the locations, but each location offers unique challenges and opportunities. Then we have locations. And I'll let you take this one since I've been talking quite a bit.
So the locations are the heart of the game. They provide a backdrop where the GM can build the story and the protagonists interact with the world, gather resources, obtain information. Each location has a brief description and some set campaign events. Locations also contain hooks that are useful in introducing other events and which can give the GM quick hints on how to run the scene. Then we got just an example here. Looks like the Exhumed Gorge. Overview, various hooks. Now for travel, the only way to get from one area to another is to pass through specific locations. Initially, the party may not know where these locations are, so it will be necessary to gather information, try one's luck, or simply visit all available locations until clues leading to the target location are found. Along the way, the party may encounter significant events, make important discoveries, find valuable items. Each game will unfold differently based on the choices players make. Hourglasses. Time management is very important to the way the game unfolds. In Bitter Chalice, time is measured in hourglasses. Each day is divided into 8 hourglasses. Certain tasks, such as exploring a location and traveling between areas, consume a number of hourglasses. When the party has used up 8 daily hourglasses at their disposal, they reset, but a full day has passed, which triggers certain mechanics. The tokens for hourglasses are placed from time to time in the sundial, the quadrant in the bottom center of the map. By placing them, GM and players can keep track of the day, the hour of the day, and whether it's day or night can also affect events or enemy types. Then we get black marks. On the left side of the map, there's a space for black mark tokens, which are the exclusive responsibility of the GM and can be obtained in various ways throughout the game. The GM can use them to increase the difficulty of certain tasks or to introduce unfavorable elements into the story. Then, excuse me, we get a description of the city of Vathan. The city of Vathan is located in the center of the Blighted Land. On the right side of the map is an enlargement of the city divided into neighborhoods that function just like normal areas that contain locations. However, not all areas are immediately accessible. Some may require you to defeat an enemy, fulfill a specific quest, or complete certain events. Long is the winding road to truth.
And here's the second thing that made me think of that, because obviously one of the big things with a lot of Souls-likes is the interconnected map. And we definitely have that here. Specifically the fact that that certain parts are cut off until you do certain actions. And anyway, we go into the fact that Bitter Chalice has 11 areas and 33 locations. And since the next part is going to go into protagonists, I want to scroll back to the example location that we get, the Exhumed Gorge, which is a passage to restless environs. So we can see that it takes 2 hourglasses when it comes to exploring this area. And it is composed of the overview, which is a brief description. I'm pretty sure the GM is meant to read that description. The hooks, which are interesting things that can happen. One of them, both of them are events that are detailed below that, as well as potential encounters. That's what's referred to with the Brute and the Raging Crowd. And then the 2 events, Look Beyond the Stone and Flesh Fruits. Sorry. So I think that makes for an interesting setup, I'd say. Then we get to the protagonist proper. Obviously, as mentioned before, the protagonists are referred to as dowsers, people sent willingly or unwillingly into the Blighted Lands by the Edict of the United Churches to retrieve objects or information, but most importantly, retrieve holy water. To create a protagonist, you have to first select your playbook by choosing a class sheet and an origins sheet. There are 8 classes and 6 origins at the start of the campaign, and more to be unlocked as stretch goals, and there were a few that did. And I know what I said earlier about Souls-likes and classes, but I think this gets arounded by the fact that the combination of class and origin is just going to be a starting point based on what I've seen and what you're going to see in this overview. But the base ones, putting aside the ones from stretch goals, are Soldier, Savage, Condemned, Assassin, Inquisitor, Alchemist, Grave Robber, and Crusader. And of course, origin is basically where you happen to be from.
We don't really have details yet from Origins from the looks of it.
Mhm.
Or what exactly the abilities it grants are going to look like.
Yeah. So,
but then we get the actual attributes the system we're going to use.
Hold that thought. I'm going to load up the Kickstarter proper to see the ones that have been unlocked as far as classes go. So let me see if we... Okay. So the other ones that were unlocked were the Criminal, the Heretic, the Iconoclast, and the Shaman. So that means you've got a total of... So you've got a total of 12 classes. That's a we already had a decent variety, but now we have even more so. Sorry, but going back into attributes, go ahead.
So we start with bones, which is your strength, toughness, physical structure. Flesh, athleticism, endurance to physical exertion, resistance to pain. Eyes, which is your reaction speed, accuracy, and world perception. Brain, intellect, memory, logic. Shade, relationship to the arcane, luck and karma. And heart, determination, charisma, courage, and empathy. Then we get to the stress tables. The 6 attributes, taken in pairs, together define the stress tables, i.e. the resilience of the protagonist in 3 different domains: physical, mental, and spiritual. Bones and flesh make up the physical, eyes and brain the mental, shade and heart spiritual. Now the 6 scores available to excuse me. For the stat distribution in this game, you get 6 scores to place. 3, 2, 1, 0, 0, -1. Each class has a suggested attribute where we recommend the score of 3, but the choice is not mandatory. We get a nice little chart here that for where you'll put for how they all look.
Mm-hmm.
And the circles across the center of each stress table represent the amount of stress the protagonist may experience in that particular area. The threshold is a vertical line that the players must draw on the stress tables. The protagonist's resistance to each table corresponds to the circles to the left of the threshold. The position of the threshold is determined by a formula that will be detailed in the game. Note the circles to the right of the threshold are not counted and aren't otherwise used in the Broken Chalice. You have, again, we got a nice little chart detailing how it works. The farther that line is to the right, it looks like the higher the thresholds you're going to have. During the adventure, the protagonists mark stress for various reasons. However, the threshold cannot be exceeded, so when it's reached, players start marking the circles in the next row down. When that happens, the protagonist suffers a penalty to the 2 attributes associated with the table. The values, including the current penalty, must be reported in the current value box.
I have a feeling that your choice of class is going to determine where the threshold is going to be. But then we have skills, which are special abilities that are either treated as active, passive, or at a cost, that give you an extra edge. Each class has 6 unique skills, and their origin gives you 3. At the beginning of the game, you choose 2 class skills and 1 origin skill, and over the course of the game, it will be possible to unlock the others as well. So we have an example here for both. So it doesn't hurt is a passive, which when you take physical stress, you can convert up to 2 points of that damage into mental stress. Or Veteran Sinner, which is an at-a-cost skill, which which lets you get the attention of anyone who might be physically attracted to you. One stress. I think that's what the 1S is supposed to be. Determine the outcome of a small random bet, heads or tails, a hand of cards, roll of the dice, etc. Or gain an extra advantage in a shade that is all about luck. I think the T there is supposed to be like test. Then we have origin skills, which you pick one of. In this case, they picked Inhuman Resistance, which is an active skill. You can use the skill to gain one advantage on any resistance test against poisons, cold, or disease. The advantage can be used to select a consequence from the advantage table, or to remove a disadvantage. Or avoid taking a test for exhaustion from temperature, weather, or marching. Or avoid the consequences of drinking alcohol and eating rotten food. However, each time Inhuman Resistance is used, a 100 penalty to eyes/brain is imposed due to the concentration necessary to endure pain and nausea. The penalty lasts until the next slow rest. And penalties go up to -3, which given the setup with this game, a penalty of -3 could be particularly devastating. But then we have memories, which represent a specific predisposition. When you have to roll in a situation related to one of your memories, you can re-roll a single die. You can have a maximum of 3 memories for each attribute. They'll provide a list of 12 memories for each attribute, but which the protagonist can assign to new memories as they progress. I do hope in the full game there is some kind of advice about creating new memories, because this could be that kind of blank check kind of thing. On the other hand, when I look at the writing for them, maybe that won't be necessary, because I don't think the memories are as much of a blank check as, say, fate aspects.
Yeah.
And for example, the destroy one, when you use strength to destroy items, structures, obstacles, or anything else.
These descriptions we got here are pretty specific.
Mm-hmm.
So I suspect when we see like more of a list in the full game, it's going to kind of follow along the lines of these 3 things we see here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't suspect it's going to be an issue of guidance for how specific these need to be.
Yeah. If they
gave us enough here to give me faith.
If there is a guidance thing, it's probably just gonna. I imagine it's gonna be a case of where the line is if somebody wants to make new memories. But then we have equipment. So you have in addition to personal talents, you can have a reasonable amount of equipment: 2 weapons, 1 armor, 1 accessory. And with each weapon, it lists the hands that you use, the attribute you're going to roll, any qualities, and how many uses of that weapon, as well as an achievement and an advantage. Armor grants protection, as well as qualities, and has a number of uses. And you have a similar achievement advantage when it comes to accessories, just no hands thing. Equipment is characterized by intrinsic properties, damage for weapons, protection for armor, but also by uses and qualities. Uses are an abstract representation of the durability of weapons, armor, accessories, or objects. Qualities add further nuance to equipment, giving advantages against certain enemies or providing specific properties. I do hope that uses is not as stringent. Otherwise, a musket that you can only use twice would feel kind of lame. I have a feeling the uses is more of the amount of days. I.e., you can't rely on the same set of equipment all the time.
I suspect you're right, But I do think a little bit more clarification here would work.
Yeah, we'll probably get that.
Yeah.
Probably get that when the time comes. But then bitterness and languishing, which we kind of already hinted at those two. So,
see, like everything else in the Blighted Lands, sooner or later, every protagonist will have to deal with bitterness, an ancient curse that affects these places. When a protagonist suffers 1 point of bitterness, their mental stress threshold moves 1 space to the left. Languishing, on the other hand, is an atavistic hunger that can lead to madness if not appeased by consuming a meal for every 8 hourglass spent. Skipping a meal means taking a languishing test, the results of which are generally unpleasant. Then we got the rations bag.
mm-hmm.
Far from being a secondary element, ration management is of primary importance in Bitter Chalice. In the Blighted Lands, every possible source of food or drink is contaminated and has a bitterness value. It is possible to consume rations with a bitterness equal to or less than the protagonist without suffering any consequence. But rations with a higher bitterness cause mental stress. Protagonists will have to balance the need to eat on the one hand and the need to compromise with what you eat on the other. Then we got a little image here, rations bag, bitterness value.
Mm-hmm.
The Chalice. An ancient artifact of mysterious origin closely tied to Vathan's past. This object accompanies the party on their journey and allows them to collect holy water tears. Tears are essential to the protagonist's progress, allowing them to access secret areas or activate special powers. And then we have challenges.
Mm-hmm. I'll
The
take
challenge.
that.
Oh,
So first we have the challenge sheet. During their journey, the protagonist will face numerous challenges, such as heralds, threats, or obstacles. To make the GM's job easier, each challenge is identified by a sheet that contains the information needed to describe and manage the action. The sheets are included in the core book and are numbered in ascending order so they can be easily retrieved when the text calls for them. Each sheet presents information that lets you know the number of attacks of a challenge, the number of stress it can withstand, its degree of opposition, difficulty, and the possible sources of damage, as well as the reward they offer, and more. So the top tier is Heralds. These have the same attributes as the protagonist, but can also have 2 different attack phases, forcing a changing pace in the encounter. And we have an example with the Strident Beast here. So we have the same attributes as protagonist at the bottom. Its health, its armor, and its number of attacks, as well as the attacks that it has access to. And due to the whole phase thing that it's doing here, I'd say that's another thing you can add to the whole understanding the assignment. Since heralds, I feel like they're intended to be the equivalent of bosses.
oh yeah.
And then we have threats. These are the most common of the challenges. Threats have a simple opposition rating as opposed to attributes. But threats have specific characteristics that require a unique approach. I'd say threats are going to be the I won't say mooks, but your non-boss enemies.
Yeah.
And obstacles are environmental affairs. You know, it says a swamp, a maze, a large party. These cannot be defeated by inflicting stress, but require an indirect approach and the accumulation of achievements during tests. And much like with threats, instead of a set of attributes, you just have one opposition attribute. in this case with Raging Crowd. But then it talks about how with tactical classes, reactions, affinities, and notes enrich each challenge. These not only make it easier for the GM, but create situations that players must resolve by taking advantage of the enemy weaknesses, their resources, and a thoughtful approach. And then we get to the resolution mechanic, and I'll let you take that.
1 second. For some reason, Edge slowed. There we go. Resolution mechanics, right? My reader went slow on me for a second there. So we have goals. When the protagonists encounter a situation with an uncertain outcome or some narrative importance, the GM asks the player to set a goal to focus attention on a particular task or to create suspense. There are 2 types of objectives. Your combat goals involve situations where the protagonists and challenges go head-to-head in an attempt to inflict stress on their opponents. And narrative goals, on the other hand, apply to any other possible situation and require the accumulation of a certain number of achievements, which can be obtained through successful tests. The combat goal is always implicit and usually means overpowering or killing. The narrative goal must be explicitly stated by the protagonist/party at the request of the GM. The narrative goal should not be too vague, nor should it push the attainment of the goal too far into the future. For an example, get the wagon across the square without arousing suspicion. There's a few others like that here. Mm-hmm. Very good thing to have this list of examples for.
Right.
Then we got managing the narrative goal. Narrative goals are those that are addressed most frequently during the course of the protagonist's adventure. They represent any contingency that does not involve combat. After the players set their goal within the scene, the GM decides and communicates the number of achievements needed to reach the goal. This number represents the difficulty or importance of the task at hand. Achievements are obtained through tests, which involve the rolling of dice, the use of an attribute, taking into consideration certain variables, and finally, the consultation of a table to determine the narrative result obtained. Players position the protagonist within the narrative so that they can trigger tests and obtain the necessary achievement. There are times when protagonists cannot or will not create a situation that allows for a necessary test. In these cases, it is the GM's duty to provide the required boosts. Again, we got a nice little lengthy example here. The GM may also award automatic achievements to reward a particularly brilliant narrative solution.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things I'm questioning how vague that is, that last line, but
I feel like
again, it's something I'm not too worried about here.
Yeah, that's the equivalent of like a applause mechanic, like say stunts in most of the old White Wolf games. You know, a situational modifier that can be given as a reward for good roleplay, kind of thing.
I'm always a little hesitant to want to include something like that, just because it somewhat favors certain types of players over others, depending on how into the story and roleplay aspect they get. Mm-hmm. And I don't really like holding someone back just because they're not as into that aspect as somebody else.
Which is fair, though it's ultimately the GM's call, so it's kind of hard to judge it from the top-down perspective.
Yeah, I'd like to see a little more information on this, but this is the overview. And even if it's something I didn't like, it'd be easy enough to cut back on. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah,
it's all good.
But then we have the combat goal management, i.e. when you're doing a full-on confrontation, you have the combat phase, which uses a procedure different from narrative goals. During combat, getting an achievement does not represent the accomplishment of the implied goal, but instead allows someone to inflict stress. And this is where we get tests introduced. This requires the rolling of 3d6, adding certain values such as attributes, narrative variables, skills, possible support from other protagonists, etc. After the roll is made and any appropriate operations are performed, it's compared to the outcome table, which is then converted to narrative by the GM. The GM never rolls. Glad that that's made clear. Each test, based on its nature, is use one of the 6 attributes to define the protagonist. Then we have a order of operations for a test. So, describe how the protagonist acts, decide which attribute to bring into play, ask the GM for confirmation, ask the GM if there are any modifiers, use any memories, decide whether to convert stress, i.e. you can take 1 stress to get a +1 on the test or to temporarily remove a penalty. Ask for an assist from other players. You can ask one of the other players for help. Each protagonist that helps will then suffer 1 stress. The protagonist gets +1 to the test for each assist received. Then before rolling, the GM evaluates the presence of a concealed modifier and calculates the gap. So then the player for the test rolls 3d6. If they've converted stress, gain +1 on the test. If they've received assist, gain +1 again. And then you add in the attribute value, then add in the gap as indicated by the GM, and then declare the final result. The final result determines the test outcome on the outcome table here. You're trying to get the highest amount, but generally scores of 11 plus are positive. So it goes...
Can I just say I've always liked flowcharts? So having this very nice chart here set up like this, from that 3d6 all the way down to final results, I really like this chart.
Yeah.
It is very nice and easy to follow.
So if you get a 17 or higher, that's 1 achievement and 1 advantage. A 16 to 14, 1 achievement. A 13 to 11, 1 achievement and 1 disadvantage. A 10 to 8, a setback and an advantage. 7 to 5, just a setback. 4 or less, a setback and a disadvantage. If you get double 1s, that's an extra disadvantage. If you get double 6s, that's an extra advantage. After the roll is made and the result is determined, the effects must be processed according to the consequences selected by the GM and the players on the respective tables. So achievements, an automatic result, get 1 achievement for narrative goals, inflict stress in combat. Setbacks, GM chooses those. Advantage, the player chooses those. Disadvantages, the GM chooses those. So I look at setbacks, advantages, and disadvantages as the but and rule.
Yeah.
And when it comes to then we have the achievement and setbacks table. So an achievement can be inflicting stress or 1 achievement. A setback can be suffering stress, getting 1 achievement but 2 disadvantages. Falling short of the goal and can't pursue it. Suffering 1 disadvantage and you don't achieve the goal, but you can try again. Losing 3 to 4 equipment uses. Ouch. 2 uses of charges are marked in case of a ranged attack. Or the GM gets 2 black marks. And as far as advantage disadvantages, it can be things like inflicting stress, take a new test to achieve the narrative goal with GM's consent, recover 1 stress on any table, gain a +1 to the next test, introduce an element in favor of the protagonist or party, subject to GM consent. On a double 6, gain an extra attack. On a 17 plus, also gain an extra attack. Whereas disadvantages can be things like inflicting stress, if called for, suffering a -2 to one of the next tests chosen by the GM, losing 1 to 2 equipment uses. In the case of a ranged attack, 1 charges die is consumed. an unfavorable element affects the protagonist, the GM gets 1 black mark. On a double 1, the challenge gets 1 extra attack. On a 4 or less, they also get an extra attack. And as mentioned earlier, there's a nice little flowchart that goes into it.
Yeah. It is a very nice chart. I kind of wish more games included something like a good flow chart does wonders for helping organize your steps and thoughts.
Yeah. But I think it's clear to see that I've seen some people look at this and compare it to Powered by the Apocalypse, but I don't think that's fair. Especially given the wider amount of results as opposed to the success, failure, or the yes and or no and that is in PBTA. There's a lot more going on here, and also a slightly better die pool, in my opinion. But then we have an example of a test. It goes for quite a bit. Then they talk a bit about a companion book called Dirge of the Dust King, which is meant to be expanded lore, a history of the Blighted Lands, a rules for solo mode, as well as a strategy guide for suggestions that the GM can offer to players in case they need some tips. You'll also find 3 routes: Platinum, Regular, and Speedrun, which are game plans that define the main stages of the campaign according to the needs of the table. If the group doesn't have many sessions to finish their campaign, the speedrun route can be offered to rush to the end of the story, still experiencing the essential sequences and finding the most useful equipment. The Platinum route allows people to know in advance where to go without missing any side quests. The normal route is the in-between. Of course, you can also play blind and be swept along with whatever fate has in store for you. And then we have wandering NPCs. These are ones that move between areas following their own agenda. Dirge the Dust King has 7 wandering NPCs, each following a different path. Intercepting them is not always easy, unless you use the strategy guide, but staying on their trail and completing their side quests offers great benefits. So we have Larian the Bitterknot, a fairy woman willing to ply the waters of the Krathian River. The Toy Maker, a scruffy little boy with fiery eyes. He's obsessed with the idea of selling his rickety toys, broken dolls, and stringless puppets. Hildredel, a creature of the forest who, unlike his peers, has remained rational. Though he must constantly fight the bitterness that grips his mind, he possesses more knowledge than a coven of sages. Nikra of Lorica, captain of the knights who protect the city of Vathan. Diacro, a time-worn old man carrying numerous scrolls and tomes. The Ragman, an odd figure in worn-out rags to the point of being overwhelmed by them. This merchant has many goods at his disposal, but demands exuberant amounts of special favors in return. When he's described as a merchant that has a lot of goods, but is covered in rags, why am I thinking of the merchant from Resident Evil 4? And King Crow, a raven who decided to become human centuries ago, but failed miserably. He commands a large flock of birds and runs a delivery service within the Blighted Lands. A raven that decided to become human.
I don't know why. That feels like a really weird Miyazaki or Ghibli movie.
Probably because you've seen a crow man in Howl's Moving Castle.
It's possible. But you can see that, right? Just a crow being human and starting a delivery service. That sounds like a fun, whimsical Hayao Miyazaki movie.
Yeah, about as whimsical as Princess Mononoke. But then what we have in the campaign, the core book, which is going to be 210 plus pages, Dirge of the Dust King, which is 120 plus pages, and the starter campaign, Escape the Mudfield, at 60 plus pages, along with the class sheets, the origin sheets, a GM screen, the map, the location stickers, hourglass tokens, and black marks. So, with that said, I know this was an overview and there's a lot of questions to be answered, but what do you think of Bitter Chalice?
My immediate thought is, yes, they've done a lot, at least in the setting and ideas here, to kind of grab that Souls vibe. I wouldn't say I definitely play based off this, but I would definitely give this book a look once it's actually released.
Mm-hmm.
They seem to, again, they kind of get the point of what it is they're trying to do. Obviously, concessions have to be made going from a heavy video game inspiration to a tabletop, but that's just a given. But I think they've got the idea right.
Yeah, I would say the best way to put it, to use, say, Elden Ring as an example. This is not so much interested in emulating Elden Ring as it is emulating the Lands Between, if that makes sense. I know this is not the first time I've made that analogy, but if the shoe fits. Also, I realize that this is... But, you know, I think it's understandable where I'm going with that analogy when it comes to this, because I've seen a lot of people attempt to do these kind of adaptations, and they end up making that same mistake. I distinctly remember saying that about Avatar Legends. Avatar Legends felt like it was trying to emulate the TV show and not the world of the Four Nations. But as kind of mentioned, now when it comes to some of the stretch goals that were unlocked, pretty much all of them were unlocked. So that includes the criminal class, a meeple upgrade. I think the meeple is meant to be kind of a token to represent where the party is at in the Blighted Lands. Let's see, the heretic class, a new art print in the bundle, the iconoclast class, extra items in the recharge pack, the shaman class, counter bookmarks, because there is going to be a bit of a game bookness with some of the books here. New art print, a group meeple, and additional art. And they were asking for... Now, as far as the... I wish Kickstarter would have shown me the original amount that they were shooting for, because I only have the... Oh, never mind. Here it is. So they were asking for about 8,000 euros, and got 71.3 thousand, including a few euros from this monk. So let me convert that to freedom dollars. So they're asking for 8,000. So about $9,000 and change. And they got 71,370. Or $80,748.15. So I'd say they did pretty good for themselves.
Oh, yeah.
Now, for me, there was a digital option, which is why I'm going to be curious how the map is going to work. The map will be available in PDF form for people who pick the digital option. And as far as what VTT I could see this being used for, I think the standard ones like Roll20, this might be a little bit tricky. Still doable, but still kind of tricky. Of course, there's also the problem of having to do the whole sheet thing with Roll20. I do hope some variety of fillable PDFs becomes a thing, because I dread the idea of having to make macros myself. Foundry would probably be a little bit easier. Foundry's a bit more user-friendly on that front, and has a wealth of mods available. The Tabletop Simulator is the one I could see being used the most in terms of virtual tabletop for this kind of game. But that's just me. When it comes to what we've got here, I think there's a few questions that I would have, like, what exactly do black marks do to make things more interesting is one of them. One of the I'd say one of the others is some of the examples of that we covered before here. But a big one is I feel like I'd want to see more of how combat is actually going to work to maintain that tactical vibe. Because saying that the game is going to be tactical in terms of its combat is a very specific thing to state. I have a feeling I know what it's trying to shoot for, but
yeah, we didn't really get enough, I think, of how combat mechanics are going to work to really say too much on that right now.
Mm-hmm. But I could see this being used as a introductory affair to bring people who have a background with the Souls video games into a TTRPG form with something like this. I know that some people have looked at this and said it feels more like a board game than an RPG, but I don't agree with that. There's certain elements, but I feel like a lot of people, when they use the term, "Oh, this feels like a board game," there's almost a kind of divided wall in that mode of thinking. I.e., you can't have a RPG with board game elements or a board game with RPG elements. That same kind of genre segregation that I've talked about in the past. Because really the closest thing to board game in this is the map. Everything else, especially the tokens, is just standard abstract resource management. You could see that in innumerable different games. But as far as when this thing is going to be out, I don't know yet. The last update was putting out pre-orders for people who missed the campaign, as well as the smoke test for the pledge manager for the campaign. But overall, I think there's a lot of potential here. Anything else you'd want to add, Monarch, or do you think we've covered everything?
I think we covered everything we could, because again, we don't have too much more in-depth on mechanics to talk about. What we have here is well explained enough, though, to give you an idea of what to expect, which I think is what something like this should be doing.
Yeah.
And it's got me interested. Like, I'd probably be willing to check out this whole book whenever it launches.
Mm-hmm. And Lord knows I'm gonna be getting it since I backed it.
Yeah.
And I will also note we didn't get into it too much here, but I absolutely love the art style we have here.
It is a very nice book to look at.
Mm-hmm. And definitely a strong sense of color theory. I mean, the big thing is holy water, so of course it's going to be using a lot of cool colors. But with that said, that is going to do it for this particular episode of The Valley. We will be back here next week to continue our look at the classes and callings of Megalos before going beyond that. And tune in tomorrow as a newcomer to the monastery joins me to look at Astra Arcana, which is the Metis folks' first attempt at doing something non-5e and first attempt at doing something science fiction. So, as would be often said, please look forward to it. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.
Oh